So, hello everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of the View for the Grandstand podcast. I am David Lloyd, and joining me this week, as always, is the one and only Mr. Gabriel Berger. Gabriel, how are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Pretty good. It's been a bit manic in the real world, as it has been
Yes.
in Formula One, actually, throughout this year. And which brings us on to what we are doing today, which is our end of season review. So, I know last time we said we were going to do the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, and we did try, but it was so boring. Even Zoom decided that it wasn't going to work, and the internet decided it wasn't going to let me talk about basically nothing.
Didn't
So,
miss much.
so yeah, exactly. Basically, cars went round, a race happened. I did
Apparently.
some marking because I'm a teacher, and I was that bored. I thought I'm going to get my marking done, so I did. It was actually quite fun. I enjoyed my marking more than the Grand Prix. So before we get into the crux of this episode, please remember to subscribe if you are watching on YouTube. It's down there somewhere. I don't know. I can't see it. You can press it. There's a bell next to it. Press that. And also, if you are listening, sorry, on SoundCloud, then by all means follow us. Drop a like on the file there. Drop a like on the video on YouTube. Leave us a comment. Also follow us on the socials. On Twitter, we are at View Grandstand, and on Facebook and Instagram, we are at View from the Grandstand Pod. And without further ado, let's get into the news. And we begin with a sort of a shock and a bit of sad news in a sense. Was that we found out the other day that Sir Frank Williams, the founder and now former owner of the Williams Formula One team, has been admitted into hospital. We don't know much about his condition, other than it's stable, and the family have asked for privacy, which of course we're going to respect. We aren't some media outlets who are going to start hounding for questions. All I think we can do as fans, and to be fair, a lot of F1 fans have been, has just been sending their best wishes to Sir Frank and the Williams family at this time.
Yep, that's as you say, kind of all that can be done at the moment. So we wish a speedy recovery to him, whatever it may be, and we'll wait to see what updates, if any, they choose to give us.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Come on, Sir Frank, we're all behind you. In other news, feels like a slightly insensitive segue, but we'll carry on, is from the sad news of Sir Frank Williams to the strange news of a 39-year-old topping the timings at the young drivers test.
Yes, this new Fernando Alonso fella seems pretty quick, so it'll be interesting to see what he can do next year in the Alpine.
Yeah, well, I mean, he ended up being faster than a lot of others, but it was interesting seeing how Alonso was faster than the two Mercedes, being driven by Nick de Vries, who is a young driver, and Stoffel Van Dorn, who definitely isn't. But then equally was faster than the other two non-young drivers in the young driver test, Sebastian Buemi and Robert Kubica.
Yes, well, you could argue, he'd had more practice in a car, given that he was throwing the what was the 2006 Renault around Abu Dhabi that weekend. So he'd had a bit of practice on the track already. But I think there's an awful lot of experience that he has that probably lends itself quite well to managing to top the timing boards at the end of the week.
And this was quite a contentious issue because you've got McLaren who have got Daniel Ricciardo coming in next season. You've got Ferrari who've got Carlos Sainz Jr. going in. You've got Aston Martin's / Racing Point who have got Sebastian Vettel coming in. They could have all really done with the way the regulations managed to get shifted.
Yes,
to having these other drivers in.
I know Ferrari wanted Sainz in their young driver test and didn't get it. I'm still not entirely sure how Renault did manage to get away with getting Alonso in.
Well, I'm not sure how they got away with it, because the sort of the ruling was that because of the way that Renault have contributed so much to the development of young drivers, that meant that they could throw in the Formula One equivalent of a pensioner into a car.
Well, and imagine kind of being on the Renault Young Driver program at the moment, and it's kind of might feel a bit pointless, really.
Christian Lundgaard has left the chat.
Yeah, there's kind of no option. I mean, it depends. Alonso might have 1 year in, think it's rubbish, and go home again. In which case, it opens it up to plenty more drivers. But until then, they're not really making use of what they've got.
Yeah, and they do have a really strong system coming up. I mean, they've got Oscar Piastri, who's just won Formula
Mm.
Three. He's going to drive for Prema next year in Formula Two, which is going to be really interesting to see him and Robert Schwartzman together. And
Yes.
speaking of Formula Two, there were a lot of Formula Two drivers in the young drivers test. We saw Formula Two champion Mick Schumacher getting his first run in the Haas. Interesting, we didn't see Nikita Mazepin making an appearance.
Not really a surprise given the last couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, well, actually, in recent events, as you would have seen last time, um, he has been in rather hot water. Has young Nikita? Callum
But,
Ilott made an appearance for Alfa Romeo, and it was confirmed by him on his social media channels that he is going to be joining Ferrari as the development and reserve driver for 2021, which is very interesting, I think.
yeah, I think. I mean, a lot of people would have perhaps expected him to get one of the Haas seats.
Mm.
I suppose the option is still there if the whole Mazepin situation continues to go south for him, in which case that seat becomes open again. As for how we'll do as a Ferrari reserve driver, I mean, of all the times to be a reserve driver, now's probably his best chance of getting a seat. Given if one of the drivers tests positive at some point, then that gives him his opportunity. But I guess we'll have to wait and see exactly how that pans out for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that he didn't get a full-time race seat, but he's in a perfect situation where if he impresses at Ferrari and Giovinazzi has a bad year, or impresses at Ferrari and Raikkonen retires,
Exactly. Suddenly an Alpha seat
an
appears
Alfa
as
seat
well.
appears, Ferrari would just say, right, here's your
Here you
man.
go. Have fun.
And Ferrari do have a habit of taking in sort of drivers who maybe haven't quite got where they wanted to get, and then sort of plonking them back out into F1. We saw it with Kvyat, where he had a year there and came back a
Yeah.
much stronger driver. Pascal Wehrlein, I mean, he hasn't come back into Formula One, but he's gone into other forms of motorsport and is doing pretty well for himself now, having spent a year in
Yeah. So
Italy.
it'll
So,
be interesting to see where Ilott ends up in the next 2 or 3 years, perhaps.
yeah, well, hopefully in Formula One, but the thing is, you don't come second in Formula Two to Mick Schumacher for not being
No.
not quite as good as Mick Schumacher, but that's normally how it works. Uh, in other Formula 2 to Formula 1 news, this morning, they're recording Wednesday, 16th of December. Probably one of the biggest kept secrets in Formula 1 this year, or what? Not biggest, worst kept secrets. Biggest and worst kept secrets in Formula 1 this year. Yuki Tsunoda has finally been confirmed at AlphaTauri, and to be honest, I think we were all like, yeah, we already knew.
We'd known that since I think around Imola, probably.
Yeah.
So no one's really surprised. Kvyat confirmed it after Abu Dhabi anyway,
Yeah.
and so I'm surprised it took them an extra couple of days before they got around to saying anything themselves.
Yeah, well, I think at the end of the day, Kvyat has probably been felt like he's been really hard done by because since the seat's been up under threat, he's performed admirably at that AlphaTauri, and he's been
Yeah,
a
well,
big part of the Red Bull system. But I think
I
we said
haven't
this previously about his sort of maybe it is just time for him to leave Red Bull altogether.
I haven't looked at the points tally since since he probably knew since Imola or something, but I expect might have outscored Gasly in the second kind of or the last few races.
Yeah,
I know he outdid him in I think Bahrain was it or maybe in Sakia,
I can't remember
same
which
track,
one.
but definitely a couple of sixth places there. So
Yeah,
he's done a really good job, but just at the wrong time for him, really.
yeah, and I mean he did that before. He did it in 2017 when Toro Rosso, as they were at the time, were bringing in Gasly and then bringing in Hartley, and Kvyat was outperforming the pair of them in the
Yeah,
two races that in the one race he did against Gasly and the one against Hartley. He beat both of them, and then Red Bull were like, "No, we're going to put our foot down and we're just going to get rid of Kvyat."
yeah. Well, I think I mentioned this in our failed recording the other day.
Yeah,
He's been in the system for a long time, and especially a system like the Red Bull system that likes to chuck people out every now and then. I'm
yeah,
surprised he's kind of stuck with it as long as he has.
yeah. Well, I mean, they have a habit of chucking people out and bringing them back in, so
True.
you never know. Maybe he might end up being back there again.
Might come back again.
And on Red Bull news, we're still waiting to find out who is driving the second Red Bull alongside Max Verstappen in 2021.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. As you said just before we went on air, if it was Albon, they would have made the announcement by now.
Yeah.
What Helmut Marko said is that there will be an announcement by Christmas. So I think it's really a toss-up between Albon and Perez, depending on who they want to go with.
Yeah. And of course, Nico Hulkenberg's still knocking around if they can't get either of them.
He is still around. I'd be surprised at this point.
Yeah.
I think it's really between one of those two.
Yeah, you'd think so. Hulkenberg's not really quiet.
A surprise announcement to move Gasly back up again, but I'd be very. They won't do that.
They've already said they wouldn't move Pierre Gasly because after his win in Monza, the AlphaTauri brand has. Well, he's really happy where he is, and the AlphaTauri brand has skyrocketed in popularity since then. So,
true.
From a business perspective, Red Bull want to keep Gasly at AlphaTauri and build that team around him.
Yes. Well, if it works for him and it works for them, then he's staying put then.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, we're also still waiting on Mercedes for their confirmed lineup for 2021.
I wonder who's going to fill their seat.
Yeah, I mean, it's a choice of one, Lewis Hamilton. The only thing is, and this is less of a surprise, really, that we're waiting because Mercedes have said from the get-go they were going to wait until the end of the season, take stock where everything is, because obviously, Lewis Hamilton has kind of achieved everything there is to achieve in Formula One.
Short of breaking the record for number of championships, yeah. He's either equaled or broken everything.
So, he could feasibly leave now and just be seen as an all-time great, which obviously would open the door for George Russell to go back to Mercedes. But he says he's still hungry. And he's just waiting for the deal.
He's definitely staying in another year. I think lots of people thought he might kind of do what Rosberg did in 2016 and call it a day. But I think, whilst he's in a car he knows will win, there's no reason for him to back out.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting you mentioned Nico Rosberg because after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, I can't remember who it was, shared the entry list for next season. And Lewis Hamilton is still on the entry list for Mercedes, despite not actually being under contract for next year. Which some people were saying, oh, does this mean anything? Just need to remind people that Nico Rosberg was also down as being entered for 2017, and look what happened.
All it means is that his name is on a list. Yeah. And so his name will stay on that list until otherwise.
Yeah, until we find out whatever way. Which is, it's a worry in a sense, because you do want to know what's happening with Lewis Hamilton. He is, after all, the UK's probably biggest sports star at the moment. I mean, maybe behind, I don't know, maybe Anthony Joshua or Tyson Fury or one of the cricketers. But he's in that top bracket of UK sports people. And of course, to lose Lewis Hamilton from that list if he were to retire would be hugely bad for...
It depends what he moves into, because he's got his electric rallying team, I think, is at X44 coming up.
Yeah, and he's also got an album that he's going to be putting out soon.
If he moves into that and he expands his music career, then, he keeps his name out there whilst not necessarily being in F1.
Yeah.
And potentially bringing more attention to other things.
Quite possibly. I mean, I know where to go if he sets up a record label. But that is the end of the news. And now we come on to the crux of this episode, which is the season review. So we weren't entirely sure how we were going to do this because we were kind of thinking, do we do just talk through every single race? And then we went to that might take about 3 hours.
We'd be here for years doing that. We'd be here till the start of next season.
Yeah, we could probably be here at least still testing.
Even if next season starts in June again, we'd be here.
Yeah, we would be here until then. And then we were like, do we go team by team? And then again, we worked out we'd probably be here for a while. So we have chosen 3 moments each from this season that we thought were particularly large, and we're going to talk about those today. And we're doing them in chronological order, and you'll find out who said them by who says the most about them. We actually start with, we're going to start with my first point, which is the fact we actually got a season at all.
Yes.
Because we went into 2020, we were going to have a 22, was it, race season? We were going to go to Zandvoort, go to Vietnam.
So much lined up.
And then pretty early on, China got cut. We knew at pre-season testing China was going.
That wasn't a surprise when it happened. No.
Yeah. But even in February, I remember saying to someone else, like, I can't remember where, I think at work the other day, just being like, but I remember February being like, COVID was just that thing over there.
Yeah,
Like,
it
oh,
wasn't our
it's
problem.
that thing over there, it'll stay there, don't worry. And then, of course, we get to Australia and they turn up, and it did take Formula One forever to announce that the race was going to not happen.
It took them until I think they had crowds, lined up outside the gates, waiting
But
to
yeah,
be
ready for
let in
Friday
at the
practice.
point they made the announcement on Friday. So, I mean, that wasn't really great. The fact that they allowed a massive crowd to gather before they did it.
Yeah. That was very sad. And we ended up just seeing race after race drop off. Bahrain dropped off, Vietnam dropped off, although Vietnam turned out to be for reasons other than the pandemic.
Mm.
Like the American races got dropped off. Azerbaijan fell off. France fell off, which admittedly I think everyone was celebrating. Monaco fell off, which to younger fans is always a bit of a, oh, at least that's one less snooze fest. But to traditionalists,
Well,
Monaco is,
the last few Monaco races haven't been too bad. We've had Verstappen kind of charging at Hamilton last year. It
yeah.
couldn't quite pay off because his engine didn't go the right way. But
We had the time Ricardo
very
just about
exciting.
managed to hold Vettel back despite being 160 horsepower off.
Yes, so sometimes Monaco can work.
Yeah, that's true. But then it was a miracle that we actually were going to get anything. We got to sort of mid-May just thinking, are we going to go racing this year? And
Nope.
then it was announced that there were going to be two triple headers to open up the season, where we were going to have two Austrian races and a Hungarian race, two Silverstone races followed by Spain, which we'll get to that part of the season in a second. Followed then by Belgium and then two Italian races, although we didn't find out about the second one for a while because
No.
initially there were sort of rumours going around that it could be two races at Monza. I think in the early stages, I seem to remember someone saying that Italy wanted two races at Monza, one to coincide with Ferrari's
Yeah,
1000th.
that could have been interesting to see. We would have had two very different races given how the
Yeah,
first one went.
yeah, we'll get to that in a bit as well. And but then equally just the new tracks that we did get. We got to go to Mugello for the first time, which I was
Mm.
really excited about, having watched a lot of bike racing from there and knowing just how good a track it is. I mean, it's great bike racing. Everyone's like, oh, but it's a bike track. And everyone, when they hear bike track, they think of Barcelona.
Yes.
Difference is, Mugello was actually built as a car track and has just been developed a bit for bikes, but is still really mainly used for cars.
Well, bike tracks often have these kind of long sweeping curves, which in an F1 car with a load of downforce strapped onto it is a lot of fun.
Yes, especially the Arrabbiata double right-hander going up the hill.
Yeah.
Um,
Lots of speed.
We saw Formula One return to the Nürburgring, which got a majorly good reception.
That was nice to see.
We had a race at Portugal, which I think I was the only person in the world who was actually excited for it. And then it gave us, I wouldn't say a classic, but it did give us a very good race, even though Lewis Hamilton won by 30 seconds.
Yeah. Well, the kind of chucking in a bit of rain at the start and some out of place cars made it all the more exciting.
To the point that it's actually being rumoured to be taking over Vietnam's slot for next April, which I'm very happy about. And we also got a return to Imola.
Yeah, kind of long-awaited return, really. I think it's been sat wanting to be back for quite a while.
Yeah, and some people saying, oh, it might be too tight for Formula One. It gave us a brilliant race.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the first half was maybe a little quiet, but the second half didn't disappoint. Yeah, after the safety car for a little bit of wing on the front.
Yeah. And then the final new race really was Turkey coming back. It's one of the few Tilkodromes that people actually like.
Again, one that kind of people have been asking to come back pretty much since it left.
Yeah.
It took a global pandemic to bring it back, but hey, we had it.
We had it, and we'll talk about Turkey in a bit. It's got its own section, followed by the golf triple header of two races in Bahrain and then Abu Dhabi. So the fact we got a season of two, I mean, we've got to take our hats off to Ross Brawn and the guys at FOM and the guys at Liberty Media for putting everything together to give us what actually, despite being a crazy season and doing like 17 races in 23 weeks, which is gargantuan.
On average, a race every 10 days, I think, almost.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. But like to put all that effort in and to keep everything pretty much as safe as was humanly possible.
Well, they said they did thousands of tests on people and
I think
returned
only got 78
a
positives.
relatively very small number of positive cases. So,
Yeah.
Compare that to the Le Mans 24 Hour in September. They basically had an outbreak after that.
Yeah.
So for Formula One to operate as tightly and as cleanly as they did is incredibly impressive.
Yeah. And if factor in Le Mans was just one race, this was 17
Yes.
races with this tightly packed biosphere
All
of
over the
people
world.
going around the world to go into different countries with different R rates and different,
Different regulations and restrictions.
yeah.
The fact they managed to pull it off as well as they did is incredibly impressive.
Yeah. And we do hope that obviously next season fans get allowed back into more races. We did have some races with fans. We had the Nürburgring was sort of at 1 to 2/3 capacity.
I think Mugello had some.
Mugello had a handful.
Monza had local
Local health
healthcare
workers.
staff.
We did see a lot of obviously appreciation for national health workers at all the races. Hopefully next season we'll get fans up. Next season's calendar is huge, and I would love to be able to go to one race, but we don't even know what the situation with the pandemic or a vaccine is going to look like at this point. But we will still be here from our respective rooms on a Zoom call next season. And now sort of onto our first racing point, where we talk about McLaren. Gabriel.
McLaren, yes, my first pick for moment of the season was almost as soon as the season had started, really. The whole kind of last lap Lando event that happened. Obviously, Hamilton with his 5-second penalty for maybe or maybe not spinning off Albon just after the restart in Austria, and then kind of seeing Lando Norris have a 2-lap charge at the end, and especially I think a few days later, Formula One released the videos with the radio commentary kind of between him and his engineer, and just the amount of stuff that they go through over 2 laps. It shows there's an awful lot more to it than just driving around and being left alone, as Kimi might want.
Yeah. And that was I was one of the few times I think I've actually cheered against Lewis Hamilton in the whole time he's been racing, was sort of seeing Lando closing the gap every corner.
Yeah, it was by 0.2 of a second, I think, or something like that at the end.
Yeah, something like that at the end.
They're 4.8 seconds behind him, which put him just about in. And so, see him take his first podium in F1 and briefly take third in the standings was, incredibly exciting.
And also, that was McLaren's second podium in 3 races.
Yes, of course. It's kind of easy to forget. You have to go about 6 at least months back to Brazil. But that was only 2 races after.
Yeah, and of course set McLaren up to finish third in the constructors eventually. Yeah,
so it's been a fantastic season for them. I think you look a few years back, they were 9th. So second last really, and they've just kind of been higher and higher up ever since then.
Yeah, every year.
So they've done a really solid job.
Yeah, and next year they've got Daniel Ricciardo Mercedes engines.
Yes, that'll be incredibly fun to watch, both for the engines and the Ricciardo Norris pairing.
Yeah. Speaking of fun to watch, it's your second point next.
It is my second point. I've got to remind myself what my second point was.
Silverstone.
Yeah, Silverstone. My second kind of most exciting part of the season for me was the tyre drama that was the end of the British Grand Prix.
Yes.
So, almost made more exciting by David Croft saying it was Hamilton when it wasn't Hamilton, and then suddenly the camera pans to Hamilton and it was Hamilton.
Yeah, I had a similar thing watching Channel 4. I had a similar, like Mark Webber, David Coulthard, and Ben Edwards in the Channel 4 commentary box were also saying when it was Bottas, "Oh, it's Hamilton."
Well, the little
label
came
it was
up
Bottas, and then the graphic came up that said it was
Hamilton,
and then we cut to Hamilton.
It was very dramatic, and I think Verstappen possibly could have won that if they hadn't pitted him cautiously the lap before. But then, in the end, what made it more exciting was Hamilton hobbling around and Max just closing and closing and closing.
Yeah.
I think in the end it was about 7 seconds between them, but the lap started about 30 seconds between them. So just kind of watching that gap come down and seeing Hamilton, I think, haul the car around for about half a lap on 3 wheels was quite something.
Yeah, that sort of moment when he comes round club corner.
That's the kind of thing you want fans there for, really.
Yeah.
It's, imagine if you'd had that with however many fans that have crammed in Silverstone every year, kind of urging them on.
That would have been quite something. Like,
So
just
noisy.
imagine the noise as he crossed the line.
Yeah.
That's the thing with
So
modern Formula One, is that you do actually hear the crowd these
you
days.
can hear the crowd because the cars.
Yeah, the cars have an engine note deeper than my voice, if that's possible. And from one chaotic ending to another, my second pick, and Gabriel knows exactly what's coming here. And I said last time that I am a big AlphaTauri Pierre Gasly fan. This was the race that made, not me, because I was already aware Gasly was a really good driver, but it made a lot of other people actually stand up and take notice of the fact that Pierre Gasly is a good driver. Red Bull just didn't build him a good car in 2019.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I could have put all three Italian races as my three moments of the season, realistically, because they were all brilliant races. But I had to choose one, really, and I was like, I've got to choose this. Pierre Gasly winning in an AlphaTauri that has its roots in Minardi at Monza.
Yeah, their first win since Vettel did the same thing.
Yeah.
13 years beforehand?
Yeah, something like 12
or
13 years. And sort of, I think this one was more chaotic though than Vettel's, because
Arguably, yes. I mean, Vettel's had the rain.
Vettel was in the rain, but he won from the start.
True. Yes.
It was a lights to flag victory for Vettel.
Happened.
This one, everything fell into place for Pierre Gasly. He got really lucky, partly because of the fact that, I mean, it was a really weird strategy call because he got pitted just before a safety car.
Almost as they knew what was happening.
Which, at the time, we all raised our eyebrows because it was a very early pit stop.
Mm.
And then Kevin Magnussen broke down by the side of the road, which closed the pit lane, which Hamilton and Giovinazzi ignored.
Yeah, well, I think they did get lucky with Mercedes messing up there.
They got lucky with Mercedes messing up there. It wouldn't be the last time Mercedes would mess up this season, which we'll come to later. Sorry, Gabriel, I know it still hurts. Yeah, they got lucky with Mercedes messing up on that side. They also got very lucky with the fact the race got stopped, because Charles Leclerc had that scary, not the scariest crash we'd see this season, but at the time, a very scary crash, which brought out the red flag because it completely decimated the tyre barrier and the car. And it was at the restart. Yeah, and the restart was one of the first standing restarts I think we've had in Formula One.
I don't remember what they were in Baku whenever it was we had all the red flags then. It was rolling.
In 2017.
They've changed the rules since then.
Yeah,
actually, haven't they?
Last year in Germany was a standing start, having done about 7 formation laps behind the safety car. But this is the first time mid-race we've had a mid-race standing restart. And that was when Gasly won the race. That was when Pierre won the race. As they were going around, obviously Lewis Hamilton was leading. Lance Stroll had pitted. Well, he'd actually done his tyre change under the red flag, which you could do, which McLaren weren't very happy about. And were tempted to protest, but I think decided against it in the end because they could have easily got a double podium that day.
Yeah. We then saw late charge from Carlos Sainz then towards.
Yeah, and that was definitely the moment of the race where we all kind of were sort of just like, whatever you do, boys, don't crash. Because
it would have been Lance Stroll would win.
Well, it wasn't even that. It's just obviously Lance Stroll gets a lot of hate from people. I mean, I'm kind of what's the word about Lance Stroll? I'm kind of like not too fussed about Lance Stroll.
He's grown on me.
There are worse drivers on the grid than Lance Stroll. Not looking at a certain Haas driver at all, but there are worse drivers and worse pay drivers in the history of the sport than Lance Stroll. So, but even then, last few laps, Carlos Sainz gaining on Pierre Gasly, gaining, and obviously the Canal Plus commentary, which unfortunately we can't play. It's kind of is that Glock times 1,000. France haven't had a Grand Prix winner since Olivier Panis in 1996.
They've been waiting for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I was born and have lived 22 years and still have 2 years spare since the last time a French driver won.
Wow.
So it's been a long time for France, and it was a historic. It's a historic victory for French motorsport, historic victory for AlphaTauri. And sort of it's a moment that you need in Formula One, and it then heightened up the idea of these reverse grid races,
Briefly,
very briefly,
yeah.
and then everyone said, "Well, hang on, if we start having reverse grid races, AlphaTauri will win all the time, and then it will get boring again."
Yes, so, and I think a full length reverse grid race would end up kind of, unless anything crazy happens during it, probably balancing it all out. So,
would end up the same as
it would
normal.
it would force the likes of Mercedes to make their car to run behind other cars for once.
Yeah.
But I think they'd still come out on top.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of Mercedes coming out on top, my third pick, Turkey.
Just all of it.
I've just put the whole weekend down for Turkey because it was really kind of weird. Everyone was so excited for it because we've not had a race there since 2011. It's got turn 8, which is probably the only corner in the world that people know it just by its number and know exactly what corner you're talking about. Like if you say turn 8 at Spa, no one knows what you're going on about. Gabriel's trying to work it out.
It doesn't even have a name, turn 8 at Spa.
Did I just pick out No Name Corner?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, the corner that's now called No Name because it didn't have a name, but now has a name, which is No Name. Anyway, back to Turkey. So obviously Turkey has the fabled turn 8, and Max Verstappen, I think, jinxed the whole weekend.
Oh yes, definitely.
He said in an interview with WTF1, turn 8 is going to be flat out. It rained all weekend.
And the tarmac was new, and so even without the rain, it was like an ice rink.
Yeah, tarmac was new, and there were no support races. Formula 2 didn't go there. Formula 3 didn't go there. Not even the Tin Top Porsche Super Cup or any National Touring Car Championships. The only kind of other running were loads of hire cars that had been sat around the circuit.
And they went out before it rained, so it just had no effect anyway.
They went out to clean the track surface of the gunk that was laying on there from the resurfacing, and then it rained, which just brought more gunk up.
Threw everything into not quite disaster, but question.
It did bring everything into kind of, well, why have we just gone back to here? But then it gave us some really sort of moments that I think we will remember in terms of like Lance Stroll's first podium, Racing Point 1-3 on the grid.
Yeah, I think, and seeing Stroll on his first pole, not his first podium.
I meant that.
I think it kind of took everyone by surprise, and the fact he got it by 4 seconds, I think it was to Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, it was to Verstappen.
Yes, that was it.
But it was Verstappen then Perez.
Yes, I think the gap between Stroll and Hamilton was 4 seconds, though. Which, if you'd said a few days before, this weekend Stroll will out-qualify Hamilton in what was at that point with the rain effectively equal machinery by 4 seconds.
Yeah,
everyone would
have thought you'd been drinking. But then the action wasn't done there. We ended up with a really early wake-up call, the earliest wake-up call for European viewers this season because of
10 a.m.
Because of the Eurocentric calendar. We had pretty much all lunchtimes apart from the 2 Bahrain races and Turkey.
Yes.
And Turkey was quite early in the morning for us. Well, relative to what it normally is, or normally was, because it used to be a lunchtime race. But of course, with it being in the middle of November,
gets dark
very quickly, and like light was fading already as they were starting.
And with the clouds over as well, it just makes it even darker.
It almost finished. It was almost pitch black by the time they sorted everything out. I think when Sky finished their live broadcast, it was pretty much nighttime. But then we saw the drive of a 7-time world champion.
Absolutely.
In the race. And I think that was really the moment where, like, if you hadn't already, and there are very few people who still thought that Lewis Hamilton had only won all his races by being in a great car. The 2009 McLaren says hello, by the way. No, but there were still some people in the world who think, oh, it's just the car and Lewis only gets it because of the car. Well, if you put that car on that track and one of your drivers manages to drive up from 7th to win and the other one goes backwards.
Almost literally backwards. You're facing backwards half the time.
Yeah, actually spent more time literally facing the wrong direction and then going in the wrong direction at the same time. then you're always going to have to take it up and think, well, hang on, that's just the quality of the driver.
Yeah, I think in the conditions they had that day, it wouldn't. No one else could have done that. I don't think. No one else really managed to gain that many places after so much kind of.
Yeah.
Not this first lap, he lost a load of places, other than maybe Vettel bringing it from 11th or 12th up to P3.
Yeah.
Or P2 even, maybe P3 actually. I don't think anyone else could have done it.
Yeah, I mean the closest person to Hamilton on track was Sergio Perez, who did brilliantly to bring those tyres home. Like Racing Point were really strong all weekend, and I think a few of us were sort of expecting them to just about manage it. We weren't sure who was going to do it because we were like Mercedes would be in traffic. Obviously, Hamilton got a really good start, was up to third by turn 2.
Yeah, and then I think got wide and dropped back.
Yeah, he had a bit of a moment where he dropped back, but then sort of just wait, just let everything else happen around him. Like let Stroll have his problems with tyres and let Vettel have his interesting strategy and let everything take place around him, and then obviously the only real thing he had to do was overtake Sergio Perez.
Yeah, that was kind of it. But I think finished 30 seconds ahead of him after not that many laps after doing so.
Yeah, Yeah, that's the thing, is that's one thing British drivers tend to be good at, is really wet surfaces. if you go karting in most tracks in the UK, they don't provide wet tyres when it rains because it would take too long to change them. So you learn very quickly, and they are expensive. So you learn very quickly when you're learning to kart how to control the kart around.
I think the first time I went karting, it chucked it down with rain.
I remember it being dry, then I was nowhere on the timing sheets. First time it rained, I was top. Top of the timing sheet. So I was like, oh, if I could get the confidence in the dry. But no, like Lewis Hamilton, confidence everywhere. And he won his 7th world title in commanding fashion.
Yes.
And after everything that happened this year, especially, but, like the whole story of his career, to go through everything that he's gone through, obviously, some people say, oh, he landed really on his feet by going to McLaren. Yeah, he did, but you don't get to drive for McLaren if you're not very good.
No,
apart from Michael Andretti, but we'll ignore that one.
Yeah, I think from the very beginning, he's clearly shown how good he is. Even before, he had a drive in Turkey in GP2, and went basically last on the first lap to second at the end, I think.
Yeah. Only a few seconds off winning, I think, by the end of that one.
Yeah, we've clearly seen how good he is.
Yeah, and he does really well around Turkey. So to see him win his 7th World Championship in that sense, to see Sergio Perez on a podium when he still hasn't had a drive for next year, to see Sebastian Vettel back on a podium, which turned out to be his last podium for Ferrari.
Yeah,
I think that was just a very popular podium.
It was.
We were all worried about what Lewis was going to say, whether he was going to announce his retirement, but he didn't. Luckily,
it almost felt like he was going to, because suddenly Webber appeared with a microphone on the podium. It was like, oh, what's going to happen?
Yeah, sort of reminded me of all the times that prime ministers have called a speech and then announced their resignation randomly, without any sort of prior warning. It was like, oh, he's going. But it wasn't anything like that. It was just more asking him how he felt about his title. And of course, we did mention Racing Point a fair bit there, and Mercedes, which brings us on to Gabriel's final point.
My final point. Well, my final point I said was Perez's win in Sakir. David's have written on our notes all of Sakir, which is probably fair enough. Yeah. So, but pretty much the whole race for me was just completely nuts. My laptop died about 20 laps in, so I had to watch it on my phone. About I think 10 in the evening.
I had to not tell Gabriel what had happened. You don't realise how hard it is.
5 hours.
Yeah, you don't realise how hard it was to not tell you anything.
My housemates made a good job of telling me things, but fortunately I managed to avoid any crucial spoilers.
Yeah.
And yeah, just I think all of it. I was happy to see Russell. I mean, we spoke about this in our first podcast, really, so just reiterating things I've already said. But happy to see Russell and Mercedes, and then it all goes wrong, and then he has to fight back up and get by Perez, and it all goes wrong again. in the end, as I said a couple of weeks ago, I think I'm probably happy to see Perez take that win, because he in the end needed it more. Russell showed everything he needed to show that weekend, and so for me to see Perez take a win, especially in a season that could very well be his last F1 season, it's probably needed more than Russell needed to win then.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I think I said at the time I didn't fully appreciate Perez's win until like a couple of days after, because I was still there was still that raw hurt of George
still
and
recovering from
taken
Russell,
away from him twice, and
the Mercedes pit stop disasters.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, Sergio Perez has deserved a win in Formula One for such a long time, but to finally get one,
yeah,
huge.
Well, we could have had one 8.5 years ago in Malaysia. That a small patch of water took that away from him.
Yeah, and he's been on the podium enough times that surely at some point he was going to get a win. I mean, we don't know what could happen. They might have just announced since we've started recording that Sergio Perez is going to be in the Red Bull. In fact, I'm tempted to check.
I am checking.
You are checking.
I think I'm not seeing anything of that happening.
I think one of us would have got a notification from something if it was the case.
No, there's still just this post from F1 with the seats left.
The driver lineup.
And that was 2 hours ago, so nothing's happened yet.
Yeah. I mean, Red Bull have just tweeted a picture of Max Verstappen, but that doesn't tell us anything.
What they'll probably do is announce it as soon as we go off air.
Yeah, that'll be what happens. It will be, we'll come off, it will happen, and then we'll have to do another episode next week where we then have to talk about driver transfers. So a season that we were very lucky to actually get in the first place has given us some great memories of watching the sport just from a truncated season. Personally, I think it proves that we need to have a shorter season.
Yes, rather than next year's 23 race extravaganza.
Like next year, they're thinking 23 races. If we're going to have 23 races, they're all like Abu Dhabi.
Please no.
Yeah, like if we get 23 Abu Dhabis next season, I might just throw it all in and go back to watching bikes.
I don't think we will. I think we'll see. Because the cars next year, I know the main regulation changes don't take place until 2022 now. But next year's cars, I think, have a 10% reduction of downforce?
Yeah, and a bit more weight to them as well.
So they might follow a bit better. They won't be as fast, probably.
Yeah.
But it will make it, with any luck, slightly more entertaining than Abu Dhabi, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it couldn't really be any less entertaining than Abu Dhabi.
Very true.
Of course, next year could well be the last year that we see DRS.
Possibly, I wasn't
They're hoping that the 2022 regs mean that they don't need DRS.
That would be nice.
It would definitely be nice because DRS has ended up actually costing so many possible battles.
Yes,
because what you end up is drivers waiting for the DRS zone, but then they're waiting and then they make a mistake.
Yeah.
And then they're out of the DRS and got to build up again for another few laps, or then have to drop back and cool the car down.
I suppose, without DRS, though, Abu Dhabi this weekend would have been even less entertaining, if that's possible.
I wonder if actually, because the drivers would have had to work for the overtakes.
Most of them are probably quite happy, would have just sat tight and dealt with it.
Well, they did. They had the DRS. The DRS kind of it failed last year, and we ended up having a much more entertaining race because the first half of the race had no DRS.
True.
And drivers were actually like, "Well, if we can't use DRS, I'll just go overtake here. Thank you very much."
Well, we did see. I think Perez said he made the overtake of his career on Norris.
Yeah.
On the final lap last year.
This has been one of the best moves of my career.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of second most famous team radio of last year's race behind I Think I'm Crying. Or did I send it or didn't send it?
Abu Dhabi always has some decent team radios.
Yeah, we always do. It's the end of the season. We got some brilliant ones this time. Carlos Sainz broke out the Sade greatest hits.
Sainz sang. I think Vettel did some singing.
Yeah.
I think I haven't actually seen, but I have a feeling Norris and Sainz might have been tapped into the same radio for a bit.
I think so, from what I saw.
Which I need to go and try and find.
Yeah, I need to as well. I saw like 5 seconds of it on Twitter, but haven't really seen much more of that. Of course, next season we've got a few driver transfers. We could quickly round those up now.
we mentioned Sonoda to AlphaTauri.
Yeah, so Sonoda to AlphaTauri went through this morning. So currently the lineup is looking like supposedly Hamilton at Mercedes with Valtteri Bottas, Red Bull is Max Verstappen and insert driver here, Albon or Perez. Who came third? McLaren is Ricciardo and Norris. Racing Point is Stroll and Vettel.
Well, Aston Martin.
Racing Aston Martin, yes, them. They become Aston Martin, yeah. I forgot that.
Easy to do.
Yeah. Alpine, as they are now know, will have Fernando Alonso, young driver, and Esteban Ocon. That joke is never going to leave, the fact that Alonso is now a young driver.
He'll be 70 years old and still be a young driver.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was a miracle that it gets the Jackie Stewart back in. Then who comes next? Ferrari. It feels weird to say Ferrari so low down.
Yeah, 6th place this year.
6th in the championship. And they're going to have Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz Jr. in their car. AlphaTauri have got Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda. 8th in the championship was Alfa Romeo, who keep Kimi Räikkönen and Antonio Giovinazzi for one more year. Haas have an all-new lineup of Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin, and Williams stick with the old faithful of George Russell and Nicholas Latifi.
Of course, we'll have to wait and see perhaps how the Haas lineup pans out still as well. But
well, we might have to wait for Williams and Mercedes as well.
True, but so far what's confirmed is the those two.
Yeah, of course, things could change. Callum Ilott might end up in a Haas.
Alex
Albon might end up in a Haas. Nico Hulkenberg might end up in a Haas. You know, there are drivers around who could be called back. Stoffel Van Dorn might play himself into being reconsidered. Nick De Vries is still looking possibly for an F1 seat if he can.
But they're both Mercedes.
Formula 2. But he's a former Formula 2 champion. By logic, he should be in Formula 1.
Yeah.
But whether he will or not is the interesting bit. Driver transfers and team news for next year, we think. Of course, that could all change between now and the time that you actually hear this. And probably will, knowing our luck. And
change in about 5 minutes.
Yes, quite possibly. We're about 20 to 3 at the moment, so that's sometimes announcements tend to be made on the hour. So we're not going to keep it going to 3 o'clock just to say, oh, by the way, this has happened. But
we could sit here and kind of slightly disastrously loop Perez's career highlights over and over again.
We did it once again, guys. I could just recite all the team radio for you. we could just do it. I don't speak Spanish, but it's the only problem. I don't speak Spanish. But yeah, that is all the team news. Calendar news, we know it's going to be a long calendar next year. We will attempt to talk about every single one.
It tires me out just thinking about it.
Yes, I'm getting really tired just thinking about that as well. We will try and talk about every single one, but of course, some we might have to put together, some we might just ignore, like Abu Dhabi. We will see on that one, but we will be here next year. We will probably actually be back either when Red Bull announce something, or more likely in the new year when we will find something to talk about. Car launches and stuff.
With any luck, there'll be a lot to talk about then.
Yeah, car launches and
car launches, driver transfers, any more season news.
Yep, and then of course we'll be back for testing as well, and then at the beginning or middle of March this year? I'm not sure.
One of those two, probably
one of those two. We will be here for the Australian Grand Prix.
I might just go and hibernate until Melbourne now.
Probably a good plan. I'll find someone else to take over whilst you're not here. That brings to an end our second ever view for the Grandstand. He's been Gabriel Berger. I've been David Lloyd. Please stay safe wherever you are. If any of you are living in London, good luck during Tier 3. If you're celebrating Christmas, this is probably the last time we'll see you before then. So do have a safe and as merry as possible and responsible Christmas. And if you don't celebrate Christmas, hope you just enjoy spending time with the people who are near to you. Happy New Year, and we will see you in 2021 for another view from the Grandstand.
Bye.